Welcome to Evolved Radio, where we explore the evolution of business and technology. My guest today is Christopher Calvert, who is an information and internet security professional with a deep experience protecting very large-scale infrastructures for some of the largest companies in Canada. Chris has a depth of knowledge around this space that I find really fascinating and wanted to talk to him about some interesting events that we've been seeing in this space recently. Today we talked about the evolution of the cybersecurity industry, as well as state-sponsored cyber attacks and the rise of the IoT botnets. Chris has a unique perspective on the development of this space, and I really hope you enjoy the conversation. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast from. Also, be sure to check out the webpage evolvedmgmt.com/podcast for show notes, links to my guests, and to check out previous episodes. Now let's get started. Today we have joining us Christopher Calvert, information and security expert with professional experience of 15 years. So welcome, Chris, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for having me.
So if you would, maybe just start on a quick background, 1 or 2 minutes on your journey to where you have come from and how you got to where you are in a pretty high level in the security industry.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, like a lot of people who have been doing security for some time, I didn't really have an orthodox path. Times have changed quite a bit. But really when I started in on, I was driven by interest and passion as opposed to, we'll say formal professional training or anything of that nature. Really, I came in from an internet operations and system administration background, primarily Unix systems, and that gave me quite a bit of insight into what was going on in the industry in terms of dealing with this emerging thing called security and abuse of different communication services. And from there, I chose to focus my career on that just 15 years ago, and took the step from sysadmin to security professional, and from there I've touched a fair bit of different topics within information security, but mostly focusing at least within the last, let's say, 7 years on what most people would consider to be offensive security, which is kind of the aggressive finding and proving out of flaws in systems.
Would most people sort of understand that as black hat security, or is that not necessarily the correct term for that?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of debate on terminology, and I wouldn't say there always has been, but it's definitely been there for the last several years. Terms like hacker versus cracker and things like that used to be pretty well defined a long time ago. But popular media, news, things like that have really blurred the lines between things like a hacker and a cracker. When you start to get into a hat color, black hat usually denotes somebody who is malicious or criminal in nature or something along that lines, whereas a white hat hacker would be somebody who exclusively does their work for good. And a gray hat kind of blurs the lines, as you might expect. So, I've definitely been on the, let's say, the paler end of that spectrum. A lot of the skills are the same, though, which is why sometimes it's a bit difficult to tell the difference. Tactics and techniques might be the same, and often somebody who is trying to do security for good, so to speak, is going to use some of the same tools and some of the same techniques as a quote-unquote bad guy might.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting interplay between the two, that in order to know the mind of a criminal and defend against it, you kind of have to get into that world as well, right?
Yeah, and not to get morally relativistic or anything like that. You do definitely need to understand the mind of the adversary, and really when we're talking about offensive security and understanding the adversary, we use those terms. We use the term adversary. We use the term threat actor. Those are really non-judgmental terms, and I think it's important to understand that. Life is full of conflict. Business is full of conflict. It's not necessarily malicious or mean-natured, but you end up in various aspects of life just pitted against adversaries, and you need to understand those adversaries if you're going to be able to win the game, so to speak.
Yeah, it's something that I find fascinating about security in the modern age is that it used to be I've described this before, that it was more about notoriety, that, people just wanted to, it was like tagging, graffiti in the past. If you could get your logo and your banner running across someone's machine or across their website, that was enough. And now it's a criminal enterprise. And it's, so there has been sort of this continuum of how the security industry has developed. How would you see kind of that evolution of the security industry since you've seen it? As you said, it was more of an emerging field when you first got into this, and you've kind of been along for the ride. What's been your view on that evolution over the time?
When I started doing this stuff, really, it was all about, for lack of a better term, abuse management at ISPs. So somebody offering some sort of internet connection would have to deal with abuse of service. And bear in mind, abuse of service is defined by the service provider, not necessarily defined historically by law. That's something that's emerged much more slowly. But service provider really defines what's acceptable on the service, what isn't, and they need a way to manage it. And some have had more success than others, and reputations get earned based on that success or lack thereof. When I started, really, you're dealing with the proverbial 12-year-old hacker in the basement that is poking around and scanning NASA and getting caught doing things like that, and earning attention from some very powerful folks, without necessarily having an overtly malicious intent or criminal intent, but definitely doing something that their targets didn't appreciate. And like you've intimated, that's really changed. There's money attached to it. There's a lot of money attached to it, and now there's very, very organized, very capable criminal organizations that are involved in in hacking, so to speak. There's nation state level stuff. It's moved into the realm of espionage and tradecraft, national security, and national defense, even offense against an adversary. So it's really spanned that journey from completely unprofessional, amateurish, just poking around, closer to the traditional definition of hacking, right out to full-on nation-state activity with full geopolitical implications.
Yeah, that's one of the parts I found fascinating, certainly in the past year or so, that what used to be very discreet espionage, and you can assume that a lot of the stuff was going on for years in the background, but it almost seems like that a lot of the planning and sort of the preparatory work that the states are doing around launching cyber attacks and defending against cyber attacks is somehow public. Is that saber rattling, or is it just that we're in an information age and it's more difficult to protect, or what's the interest or the progression from this stuff being done under covers and discreet to now being more in the public eye?
Awareness is key. I think you really hit the nail on the head right off the bat. It's coming into the public eye. It's not that this kind of thing hasn't happened before, and if you watch James Bond movies from the point at which James Bond movies were being made, there was really no such thing as a personal computer then. Literally, there was no such thing as a personal computer then. And you see spies, and you see tradecraft, you see human adversaries pitted against each other. And as that movie franchise went on, you see an arms race in technology. You see almost even the same story told again and again, and in some cases literally with Casino Royale. You see the same story told again, but modernized with new technology, which means new tradecraft, right? New skills are necessary. A new baseline of technical expertise is required in order to achieve the objectives in some sort of conflict like that. So I tend to think of things in those terms, in terms of adversaries, in terms of conflict, in terms of move and counter move. the security profession has had to go along the journey as well, and understanding the level of maturity involved in those conflicts. And now we need to understand, at least at a very basic level, some of the concepts of game theory and things like that. Whereas before, you maybe come out of a sysadmin background like I did, and you might have to understand a little bit of information theory or things like that, and it's really more a matter of engineering and computer science. And now there's game theory and chaos theory and all these really awesome esoteric things that theoretical mathematicians and physicists tend to really do well at. So it's and then of course there's the emergence of geopolitical motivations, right? So you start to get into a bit of history and things like that. It's become very, very nuanced.
So that's the one that we've seen fairly recently. There was quite a bit of public attention drawn towards the U.S. and Russia kind of posturing, certainly through the course of the U.S. election, and there were kind of these rumors around the U.S. and Russia prepping kind of a cyber Cold War, and that's why I kind of alluded to that saber rattling. They're saying we have plans, we could launch a cyber war against Russia or the U.S. and just to sort of state that they're prepared and ready if anyone wants to make the first move. And there's even rumors that Russia was making an active effort to tamper with, if not at least the psychology of the U.S. electorate, if not the systems. Any thoughts on sort of that, though, either at the sort of the state pissing match, for lack of a better description, or the influencing the election and whether or not we'll continue to see actions like that from states?
So I guess first off, that's not even remotely new. It's just we're seeing a different aspect of it with the technology. So the types of conflicts that we've seen for decades, and I'm sure longer, they're just being expressed in constantly evolving ways, and the technologies at play force the ways that it is expressed to evolve. Really, the adversaries don't have a choice, right? So you need to wage the conflict on the battlefield that you're presented with, and that battlefield includes all these information networks and telecommunication systems, and just a very set of complex systems that require it to be, for lack of a better term, more and more of a cyber conflict. There's a lot of controversy over the term cyber. I would say more than you have with hacker versus cracker for back in the day. A lot of information security professionals really bristle at the use of the term cyber. The thing that I think it's important to realize is that it does have meaning. It has meaning not within the last 3 years, but in the last several years as a emerging area of military doctrine. It's one that nation states are really, really struggling to understand the context of, we'll say, effective conflict and even international law. It's definitely not something that is new, but again, awareness. So the saber rattling, constant. Even the term harkens back to the old days when there were physically sabers being rattled. I don't want to accidentally coin a term, but yeah, it's a lot of cyber rattling now.
There we go. It's out there.
No, stop. Delete.
Yeah. One of the things, Chris, that I've noticed, I led a security group in the past, and it was sort of one of my first real introductions to what happens under the covers and deeply understanding what's at stake and what's being protected and generally the level of risk. And I have to say, it did make me a little more paranoid for a period of time. You work at a pretty high level at this work. Does it make you paranoid or fearful for sort of the implications of sort of the larger, more state actor attacks and the implications that could have for kind of modern life? How do you get past that worry?
Yeah, I'm going to do something else, which I think I'm going to regret. So as the great sage Kurt Cobain once said, just because you're paranoid, don't mean they're not after you. So I don't like to consider it paranoia. Certainly to non-security people, most security people, if not all of them, appear to be paranoid. They're super paranoid. But I think it's something that happens with awareness, and I think the baseline level of, let's say, concern or even anxiety amongst the general population, at least those that read and watch the news, they're getting more and more concerned, more and more anxious, more and more paranoid. I think the difference between paranoia and the difference between we'll say justified concern is really bridged by accuracy. As a professional in this space and doing this for some time, I think I've got a very accurate and very objective view of the world and of the technologies and the conflicts in play. So I wouldn't say I'm paranoid. No, I would say that I see threats that the vast majority of people don't see. But that's true, I think, of any professional that has a view into a world that just most people don't. Lawyers understand the implications of various things, law and extra legal, quite well and in a different way that non-lawyers do. People with a really robust business background or finance background understand the implications of some of the things that go on in the economy much better. Historians understand the long-term implications of the past and see patterns repeating that the vast majority of people simply don't see.
And I think that's sort of what I'm alluding to, is that you understand probably better than most, or the sort of the level of practicality around a full scale digital war. We'll move away from cyber if you like, but a digital attack that could potentially cripple, say, a power grid, and the level of implication on that, putting millions of people in the dark for days and potentially weeks on end, could have seriously crippling effects to society and the economy and things like that. Is that just sort of the state of the world? And it's like policing. That there's bad people out there, but you have to hope that and trust that people are also working just as diligently to protect you. And I also feel like this is maybe a bit of sort of the mutually assured destruction methodology from borrowing again from the Cold War, that no one has a good interest in launching one of these because there's a self-detriment that's built into attacking any other economy on a digital scale. Is that maybe where some of the comfort is baked in as well?
I think that we need to take a bit of a different assumption, rather, that these sorts of attacks, this sort of constant conflict, is happening, has been happening for longer than we've been aware of it, will continue to happen, and isn't maybe the doomsday scenario that some people fear it is, or maybe have a vested interest in portraying it as. There's been a lot of conflict in the world. That's not news. I think what is interesting and what not a lot of people know is that targeting communications and the integrity and confidentiality of communications has been a concern for a very long time. Encryption is not new. If we even go back to the last huge conflicts of the previous century, I think some would argue that the battle was won for the Allies because of the ability to break access crypto systems, and that happened on really both Atlantic and Pacific sort of spheres. All the stuff about breaking the Enigma machine and cracking, Japanese communications and then taking advantage of it. You get into kind of the realm of intelligence and counterintelligence. Once you've cracked a crypto system, you can start perhaps injecting false information in and watching for the moves of your adversaries, or perhaps leading them towards specific moves that play out in your favor. And that's exactly what happened in the Pacific. The other thing, and cycle back a little bit to the idea of awareness. Just looking at a book here from my bookshelf. So if you want to get an idea of how long the debate has been going on about cyber warfare, I'm looking at a book right now called Strategic Warfare in Cyberspace, written by Gregory J. Rattray. And really this book is an attempt to understand how cyberspace plays a role in strategic warfare. So let's play a little game, and hopefully you haven't already cheated. What year do you think this was published in? Actually, wait, maybe you've got it wrong.
I'm going to say 88.
2001.
Okay. I tried to go way back.
You did. Yeah, but still, so that's quite old in terms of the topic area. It's quite old. And again, this isn't the thinking around this, the struggle with understanding what this all means to society and to civilization. It's not new. I've got another book here, Cyber Deterrence and Cyber War, which kind of touches on your mutually assured destruction comment. 2009, published by the Rand Corporation. There's been a constant struggle to really understand this, but I'd argue that the same thing happened with previous transformational technologies like gunpowder. Japan is another example where Japan was forced into the modern world by the Europeans coming and bringing firearms, and firearms, it turns out, do quite a good job against mounted sword and bow wielding samurai. And it changed warfare in Japan, and Japan had to modernize very quickly. And I think now what we're seeing is a number of different states having to modernize very quickly in terms of information technologies and conflict in that context.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like as you were talking about that, it kind of gave me a sense that manipulation may be more the game than it is destruction. Like I said, that no one has a vested interest, or everyone has a vested interest in the progression of society as a whole, and they don't necessarily want to tear down something or decimate another country or another society. But being able to manipulate them and influencing them in a direction that they prefer is a far more powerful tool than destruction.
Yeah, it can be. Depends on your objectives, right? So if your objective is to knock out communications for a short period of time, then what you do will be designed to achieve that objective. I think very rarely do you want to completely destroy a target system, target environment, target nation, but knocking out power or communications or any other critical infrastructure for a short period of time could work quite well. I mean, look at the havoc wrought during the ice storms in eastern Canada some time ago. I don't think there's any evidence that was, a cyber event, or a cyber event was related to the other major power outages that took place in both eastern Canada and eastern U.S. But that ice storm was a natural occurrence, and so we have a few instances where we see nature kind of imposing effects like that. If you look at various armed conflicts over the last, few decades, I think quite a few of those were preceded by quote unquote cyber attacks. My understanding, and I'm not an expert in warfare or history there, but my understanding is that before the airstrikes in Kosovo, NATO used attacks against communication systems to make their targets less capable of communicating and responding. I think it's also quite well known that before Russia invaded Georgia more recently, they used cyber conflict, and then the same is true for Ukraine, as I understand it. And there's some evidence and some public research and reports that have been released, and a number of different, publicly available pieces of information that can help you kind of get to that conclusion. Does it play a role? Is it is it a massive society-destroying kind of threat? No, I think it's just another way that technology is used in what is ultimately human conflict. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is to try to understand your adversaries, understand what their objectives are, understand how they go about achieving those objectives, and then you can get to a closer capability of anticipating what they're going to do.
Right. So we've kind of taken our history lesson on what we've learned and what that potentially means for our present. One of the things that I'm concerned in the future, because I keep sort of tabs on this. I'm certainly not a security expert, although I find the industry fascinating, like to keep up on it. But I've been talking to a number of people about the concern over the rise of the IoT botnets, which is, for people that don't know, is the Internet of Things, which is essentially everything with a microchip potentially has an IP address in the future, and you bring it home, you attach it to your Wi-Fi, and you don't really have a lot of control over the security and safety. And the people that are producing this stuff it's generally kind of junk electronics, and there's not a lot of security built into them. And a great example of this, in October, there was a huge DDoS attack on a DNS provider that took down some fairly significant sites on the internet. Twitter was affected, Netflix was affected. A lot of companies that have suffered a lot from this. I'm curious, your sort of deeper insights on what are the implications of the rise of the IoT and its sort of lax security because of its ease of entry into the internet.
Stop biting my tongue. IoT security is a big problem. I don't really understand why we as a species insist on repeating the same mistakes over and over again, even within the same lifespan of those who made the previous iteration of those mistakes. IoT is rife with those repeated mistakes, in my opinion. I'm certainly not alone. That said, I think what we have learned allows us to hopefully correct those mistakes much earlier in the process. And you know what? I'm seeing signs of that. So, I see signs out of governments. I see signs out of the industry. And I'm using that in a very, very broad sense. There are always going to be organizations that put together devices, put together technologies, write code, and so forth that try to get features developed and ship it as quickly as possible, and just don't think even remotely about the future or about their responsibilities as they do that. And fulfilling all those responsibilities takes time, it's costly, it takes all sorts of different drains on your resources to accomplish effectively. And I think what we'll probably end up seeing is very strong public and private sector pressure on organizations like that globally to correct those mistakes very rapidly if there's evidence that they have. And the DNS provider denial of service that you referenced has triggered that kind of action. But even before that, we saw the debut of that capability against a very well-known security blog, some Brian Krebs blog. Yeah, it was blasted off the face of the internet with the largest denial of service ever recorded, which was then the second largest denial of service ever recorded after the DNS provider was hit a short time later. So when that attack took place, really, I think a lot of people were left wondering, it's like, why on earth would you expose that kind of capability against a blog? And not to downplay Mr. Krebs' influence, because he's a hero of the internet security community. I agree.
To some degree, I suggested I was surprised it took that long, because he was such a public target, right? He had an inside scoop on so many of the attacks beforehand.
So he gets hit constantly. Let's just make sure that's he gets hit constantly, and I think it's been covered quite a bit on his blog. So it's not the first time he's been targeted, but this was the debut of a massive capability. And so if you ask yourself, well, why would you play that card on a target like that just to get what appears to be revenge for some reporting that landed some, back to your earlier comment, black hats in jail.
Right.
So the answer is they didn't burn any capability. It was just a debut. They're saying we can do this at a whim, and it's easy because of IoT, it turns out. So all of those devices out there that have been shipped without any sort of sensible lifecycle management, without any sort of patching capability, without proper thought towards maintaining the thing over its life cycle, they've created that capability. In the case of the DNS provider attack, it was, I think, mostly IP-connected security cameras, cheap IP-connected security cameras. And the vendor responsible for that, I think, has been at least partially convinced of the error of their ways. But it's the new reality. So we're going to see denial of service attacks like that. We're gonna hit a terabyte at some point, and sooner than I think we hope. So I mean, it's very destructive. But ultimately, when you take out entire communication systems, you are also taking out the revenue stream of, I will say, some very powerful criminal organizations. You're also interfering with critical infrastructure, which means nation states, which means national security, and so on and so forth. That can have extremely serious repercussions. And probably the criminal side of it may be the most scary. Because some of these groups, they don't mess around. They're playing in the digital realm because it's kind of easy money. But these are serious folks.
Yeah, and to me, it's sort of a good analogy that I would think of is that it's a bit like a biological response, right? That, all of a sudden there's a super virus, and not in the digital sense that you traditionally think of a virus, but a virus that attacks the ecosystem of sort of the digital communications infrastructure. And now everyone sort of recognizes, wow, this is different than what we've dealt with before. And now we're forced to innovate and to develop a better security infrastructure that can defend against these types of attacks that are developing, and hopefully set a precedent to put more weight and research into developing against future attacks. So in a way, it's kind of like this stimulus and response mechanism for the ecosystem and health of the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other aspect of that is that when you're choosing defenses for your organization or your information assets or what have you, you're really supposed to be designing those defenses against your adversaries, your known or suspected adversaries, let's say. For in the Krebs example, his new hosting arrangement is probably not going to fall to such an attack. So it's not that kind of service didn't exist before. It's just that he wasn't on it because he didn't think it was that much of a problem, and things changed. If we look at home security, often the firewall device that's handed to you by an ISP may be enough, and the free antivirus that comes with your operating system can be enough. Sometimes you think that the complete lack of antivirus on your operating system is good enough, but whether or not that's the case, I think if you went to an enterprise security environment and you said, oh no, you know what, the little modem with the little NAT gateway and this free AV or not AV or whatever, who cares? That's good enough. That's not really going to fly. It's not going to fly at small organizations. Certainly doesn't fly at larger ones. So the defense has to be tailored towards the threat, and the threat comes from a threat actor, which is really a human or a bunch of humans on the other side, and it's all about the human conflict.
Yeah, this is an interesting area that I'm seeing a lot of growth in. So I work with managed service providers and IT service providers, and one of the emerging markets that everyone's starting to really start to focus on is security management for businesses, because there's a certain level of awareness in that public thought process of how critical this is and how at risk people are. I think you're right. That's one of the conversations that those folks have a lot is, well, I can go to Best Buy and buy, this $80 router that connects me to the internet, and you're trying to sell me one that's $300. And there's a good reason why there's a price gap between those. But, people really struggle with an awareness around that. But there's certainly a developing market around that security management. And I'm interested in kind of your thoughts on, the enterprise is aware of this, but I trust you're seeing an awareness and a development in the small to medium market where they are getting on top of this, and there's probably a significant business opportunity to help people to remediate this and move them to a more secure future.
Yeah, I think at the consumer level, a lot of people who are spending $200 to $300 on some sort of gateway device are probably not doing it because of the security features, even though those come with it, but they're doing it because of the it's got 6 antennas instead of 2, and it's got a really cool red shell, or it's got all sorts of awesome Wi-Fi features and things like that. So they're spending money on features that they want, getting the features they probably need along with that for free, but not necessarily turning them on.
The positive Trojan horse of security, then give them the fancy box, and little do they know it's better to secure them.
Yeah, attach it to features that they want to pay for, and yeah, you can get good uptake there. I think at an enterprise level, large or small, there's so much variation across any industry or any sector that it's really difficult, I think, to draw conclusions. I don't think that there's really all that meaningful of a difference between sectors. I think inherently technology-focused areas like telecommunications, critical infrastructure, obviously has to be more aware of the technology and do more for security. But I think that's just not universally true, and there's also major differences across jurisdictions with say major legal differences. So there's very little to no liability for a consumer for fraud or bank compromises or things like that in Canada, as I understand it. In the U.S., that's quite different, and and I think you have different approaches to security in that sector accordingly. It's kind of it's an unfair comparison because banks tend to be much more numerous and smaller in the United States versus Canada, where we tend to have a much more of a large consolidation, monopoly friendly. I'm not using that in a judgmental way either, but monopoly friendly kind of set of industries where it's possible for a company to get larger and have fewer larger organizations, which ultimately means they have more resources to throw at security. That said, the quality of the team makes a huge difference, and if you have the support from the executive in any organization, and they get it and are willing to fund and support security initiatives, then you can see incredible differences in maturity in both large and small organizations.
Yeah, so the awareness is key to making that shift, right?
Buy-in, the buy-in of the key decision makers, the people who control the money and the resourcing. Turns out that's very important.
Right. All right. Well, appreciate your time today, Chris. Any parting words?
It's been a great pleasure, and I really enjoyed talking with you. And obviously this is a topic of great passion for both of us, and I think it's an important one for people to understand. And maybe parting wisdom, if you can call it that. Be aware, think critically. Try to understand rather than assume. Remember that security isn't about technology. Security is about human adversaries in some form of conflict, and technology constantly evolves, and that's just the way that these conflicts are expressed.
Right. Great parting words. Appreciate it. Thanks again, Chris. Have a great day.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks, Todd.